Thank you for that lovely introduction, Jean. It was really a pleasure to work with you. I want to thank the Brooklyn College and its president and its Department of History chair. This is such a wonderful day and a wonderful topic that you have decided to feature, current trends in African American history. And especially to have this John Franklin Memorial Conference. I don't think I could think of a better topic to introduce the new From Slavery to Freedom, Current Trends in African American History, because it is an updated book with many of these current trends in it. In 2004, John Hope Franklin asked me to become his new co-author. He passed the torch, so to speak, to me to revise the book. He was working on his autobiography, Marriage to America, and so he left to me the job of updating his enduring book. And as Jean said, it's now in its 9th edition, more than 60 years old. It has been with us. Today, From Slavery to Freedom is a new book. Its chapter titles are new. Its historical actors and scholarly findings throughout its many topics are new. I regret deeply that I won't be here this afternoon to hear the panel that talks about using From Slavery to Freedom, but I'm hoping that I can return or at least be in conversation with some of you who will be using the new book. When From Slavery to Freedom comes out, that will be after January 2010, I hope that I might be able to continue this conversation, as I said. As I engaged in this revision, I was always conscious of what I call the present in history. When I think of the new From Slavery to Freedom, and especially as I think about John Hope's, I call him John Hope, enduring legacy, I'm always conscious of what I'm calling the present in history. Now, when I say present, I do not mean presentism. For the historians in the audience, we know that presentism is a bad word. It means to fail to study the past on its own terms, by removing the historical actors from their specific times and their social context, and then judging them by our own times. That is not what I'm doing in completing this 9th edition. Indeed, the present in history has 3 meanings for me, and I will share that with you today. The first meaning is exactly the topic of this conference, current trends in African American history, because the 9th edition carries the history of African Americans to 2009, for one thing. And it also draws upon the latest scholarship. It comes to grips with the present moment in the writing of history. And when I say it comes to grips with the present moment in the writing of history, I mean that it has to incorporate really what has become a mountain of scholarship before us today, with new disciplinary methods, which revise older interpretations. So just to give you an example of how Africa has changed, that chapter, that very first chapter on Africa. For decades now, archaeological excavation in Africa now refutes ideas that Africans, any kind of cultural influences came from the outside of Africa. Archaeologists, for example, now prove that Africans south of the Sahara were responsible for the development of metallurgy, and that would be in West Africa, and these great stone monuments in southern Africa. Today, scholars know much more about Africa itself, about slavery in Africa, about the internal trade and the rivers of networks of trading, and in fact, the role of Africans in the Atlantic slave trade. Based on new scholarship that utilizes digital technology in connection with social scientific research, the new From Slavery to Freedom provides a clearer picture of the number of slaves. That used to be an endless debate. how many slaves left Africa for the New World. And much of that debate was covered in Slavery to Freedom. That debate doesn't need to be rehearsed over again. These new digital technologies have looked at huge databases of slave ships and give us a better understanding of the actual number of slaves. Not precise, but a far greater accuracy than what we understood before. The book now tells a different story of the early experience of African descended people in North America. In North America, the presence of black people does not begin with the Virginia colony, but it begins with the Spanish colony of Florida, which is a big colony that covered much of what we think of as present Florida and South Carolina, Georgia, moving through Alabama and into Mississippi. African descended people were in Florida, in St. Augustine, the oldest town in this nation, as early as the 1560s. In fact, blacks in North America preceded by several decades the British settlement of Jamestown. I never learned that when I was coming along in school. So these new historical actors come to life. The extensive work in women's history makes possible a far greater incorporation of women than in earlier editions. So women appear throughout the text. I mean, I have this great story, one of my favorites. I don't know why I love this story so much. One of my favorite stories is about Harriet Tubman in the Civil War. She was a scout, so she was very actively involved in the Civil War to the point where Harriet Tubman asked for her pension after the war was over. And she said, I'm not talking about my husband's pension, I'm talking about my pension, because I was a scout and a spy and I was there. One of my favorite stories of Harriet Tubman is Harriet Tubman saying that she was walking with these other soldiers and they were told to move to the double quick. So she had to then run, and now her skirt, because she had these long skirts, was just really in her way. And it was getting torn and shredded, and so she says to friends in the North, I really need you to send me bloomers, because I can get along much better than bloomers. So during this time period when bloomers are being introduced, you never thought that they would be introduced in the Civil War army. The present in history also talks about women, for example, appear in slavery, in abolitionism, in the Jim Crow era, in the Civil Rights and Black Power movement, very prominently in the new book. I'm not unmindful that From Slavery to Freedom appears at a time when scholars reveal significant changes and differences in their interpretations. For example, the topic of slavery continues to find new interpretations. It's an old subject, but it just keeps getting reborn. So historians like Stephanie Camp, who writes about the alternative geographies of slave women, or Walter Johnson, my colleague at Harvard, who writes about the slave market experience in New Orleans, or Susan O'Donovan on the gender implications of slavery and freedom in Southwest Georgia. All of these interpretations are in From Slavery to Freedom. But these historians argue. They argue over balance. So, for example, how much weight should you give to slaves' agency versus the oppression of slaves? Their agency or their victimization? Which one should be emphasized? Which one should be minimized? Historians are not in agreement with that. And there are new subjects that come to us from the present. The questions that we bring to the past, as historians, the questions that we bring to the past are often expressed by our concerns in the present. There is no coincidence that themes of diaspora and transnationalism have arisen at a time of globalization and immigration. So these ideas that we talk about today, when we ask our questions of the past, are questions that are looming in our head also based on our present realities. And so in this new book, I talk about, for example, this Caribbean influence the Caribbean peoples and others that are coming to New York and into the South in the early 20th century. I call that chapter Voices of Protest. Not just simply Marcus Garvey, but Hubert Harrison and Cyril Briggs and lots of people, some radical, some not so radical, but a lot of these new voices that never appeared in your book before appear now. Winston James, who wrote the book Holding Aloft the Banner of Ethiopia, is one of the sources for this. Or, for example, Mary Dudziak, who writes about Cold War civil rights, or Penny Von Eschen, who writes about anti-colonialism on the part of Black advocates against imperialism and colonialism. Or Kevin Gaines, who writes about expatriates, American expatriates in Ghana. How does all that fit into our understanding of Cold War civil rights and Black power? I talk about that map in From Slavery to Freedom. You know, it's interesting that the freedom of information and the opening up of documents now gives us a new window to the past. Today, historians reveal various facets of the Cold War civil rights, as far-ranging as how the Cold War literally influenced the Brown decision. And one of my favorite topics is the way music and artistic issues are influenced by the international. My very last chapter, which I call Perspectives on the Present, has a section on global hip-hop and some of the various hip-hop artists that appear throughout the United States, in France, there's a person from Senegal, and a lot of different other ways that these local communities express through this language of hip-hop a new sense of the hip-hop nation. I also call attention to local studies, and when I talk about local studies, I'm talking about really this new wave of scholarship that has been led and pioneered by people like Jane Theo Harris. This idea that the North had a civil rights movement is relatively new, and Jean really did have a lot to do with bringing that to our attention. But these ideas of local history and the use of oral methods, oral history, is very important to bring into the conversation individuals who were hitherto absolutely invisible. Women, sharecroppers, laborers, their stories are now able to be told. Indeed, the 9th edition covers clashing viewpoints, as I said before. There's never been a consensus on political ideology in the Black community, nor strategies for racial advancement or artistic freedom, to name just a few issues of contention. It's a much more richly textured understanding of social movements than the top-down perspective that comes from the government or from the leaders of national organizations. And I want to emphasize that those voices, the government and national leaders, are there because they are important, but they aren't the only voices. And in fact, if you think about it logically, how would a national movement start? It would have to start at local levels throughout the country. And then that groundswell connects to create a national movement. So I talk about that with Black Power and with the Civil Rights Movement and that long Civil Rights movement, Jack Landau. Paul talks about the Civil Rights Movement. I begin in the 40s with labor, and I go through the legal movement, and I go into the nonviolent direct action, and I go into Black Power. The role of culture, again, and cultural production figures significantly in From Slavery to Freedom. So what I have done in this book is to really bring musicians and painters and literary artists and others into a discussion of history, because culture has played a very important role in the shaping of African American history. In addition, chapters, for example, in these cultural discussions, I talk about global networks. So in my chapter, The Arts at Home and Abroad, in the 1920s and 1930s, I talk about a slew of things, from blues and jazz, but I also talk about French connections, as I call it, And these are these musicians and writers and visual artists who are in Paris. And they are working there in the 1920s and 1930s. The second meaning, however, of the present in history conveys the idea of history in the making. So the first was the current status of scholarship. But the second one is a little different because it's about history in the making. And in this sense, I bring Franklin himself into the narrative. And I bring him into the narrative because he was a history maker. And his modesty did not let him put himself into that text, but he deserved to be in that story. John Franklin's personal involvement in historic events reveals an important experiential quality that was previously missing from previous editions. So, for example, when we get to the 1929 race riot in Tulsa, his family is one of the families that is uprooted by it. And so, interestingly enough, when we get to 2000, the 21st century, and we talk about reparations, John O. Franklin is one of the litigants, one of 150 litigants of that Tulsa race riot to bring his case before the courts. The other interesting thing about John O. Franklin is that he was a scholar activist throughout his entire life. The book itself, this is professional and adult life. The book itself narrated a usable past because the book itself was used by the NAACP and by other groups in the 1950s to talk about the condition of blacks. But if you look at John Franklin and his own role, it's really fascinating because John Franklin, because he had this knowledge of the past, served the NAACP's litigation in 1949. It was called Lyman Johnson versus the University of Kentucky. And what he did for Thurgood Marshall was to show how the school, the University of Kentucky's resources, its library, was so much better than the black library. And so with that information, from his own scholarly efforts, the NAACP won that case. And then, if you are familiar with John Franklin in the Brown decision, he was also very instrumental in that. He was one of a whole group of social scientists who worked to bring the end to segregation in the public schools. This is what he wrote in in 1989. He's talking about his life as a scholar activist, and he's talking about how he also was on the Selma March. But then he says, while a black scholar has a clear responsibility to join in improving the society in which he lives, he must understand the difference between hard-hitting advocacy on the one hand, hard-hitting activists on the one hand, and the highest standards of scholarship on the other. And I don't think anyone would question that John Franklin performed both roles with integrity. But he says, and I end with this sentence of his, this quote, if the scholar, at least in this section, if the scholar engages in both activities, activism and scholarship, he must make it clear which role he's playing at any one time. So the New From Slavery to Freedom discusses this generation of scholar activists, of which he was a part. And there is new scholarship on this. We have scholarship, of course, by David Leonard Lewis, his two biographies of the brilliant Du Bois, but also Jonathan Holloway studies the black scholars E. Franklin Frazier, Ralph Bunche, and Abram Harris during the 1930s, or Kenneth Jenkins' biography of Rayford Logan, and also Walter White. Think of John Franklin within that group of scholar activists, all academics, all teaching in colleges, and yet very active on the political front. He also was a person who was coming of age during not only the burgeoning civil rights movement, but the growth of American universities and an unprecedented number of individuals, especially black scholars, trained in academic fields that took seriously and sought to investigate rigorously race relations and the African American experience. I talk about that in a chapter called American Dilemmas. And what I pluralize that dilemmas, riffing partly off is there a problem, as Darrell Scott says, with a contempt and pity? What is the dilemma for a black person who wants to be an advocate of economic justice at a time when the Cold War associates some of those kind of claims with communism or subversive activity? In many places in the South, if you were a white person calling for integration, you were automatically labeled un-American. If you were a member of the NAACP after 1954, the NAACP in certain places was outlawed as a subversive group. Those were dilemmas that black people faced. And finally, I want to talk about John Franklin the legacy of John Franklin in this context of the present in history. And by that I mean that John Franklin himself was a gift. Do you know, when he served in the late 20th century on President Clinton's initiative on race, John Franklin led that initiative. He was the head of that board under Clinton that called for dialogues on race. And this is what he wrote himself. I featured this clip from John Franklin in something I call the window in time. Windows in time are throughout the book. And windows in time are there for you to put yourself back in a historical moment when a person is speaking at that moment. And this is what he says about the work on the board to create a discussion about a vision for racial reconciliation. Throughout the entire life of the board, I reminded myself of the admonishment President Clinton delivered to America in San Diego, just as the board's work was commencing. There was no more precious gift our generation could present to future generations than to lift from them the heavy burden of race. This was not a problem to be fixed by the board, he concluded. At best, the board could help delineate its contours, this problem of race, and point to solutions. But this was not a problem to be fixed by a president. Several presidents with courage equal to Clinton's had struggled to confront American racism. The problem of race in America has been and continues to be an American problem. And the conversation the board began was and remains the means to a national solution. I thought that was beautiful, but what I was struck by more than anything else was his understanding of this no more precious gift of a generation. And I'm concluding this last metaphor of the present in history by focusing on the word present as a gift. Something that's not guaranteed to its recipients, but it's just given graciously. And in this last regard, the present in history has been nothing short of John Franklin's great willingness to share what he himself termed a life of learning. His autobiography, Mirror to America, was one such gift to the historical record. When Franklin did the research for his two earliest books, these are Free Negro in North Carolina, which was published in 1943, and From Slavery to Freedom, which was published in 1947. I don't know if you knew this, but when he wrote those two books, he could not even go to most public libraries in the South. He could not use many of the archives. When he showed up at the door of the archives, the state archives in Raleigh, North Carolina, and in Montgomery, Alabama, he describes a near state of emergency. They do let him in, though. And when they let him in, they put him off to himself in a very isolated situation so that he could work, but that he wouldn't be in contact with other scholars. And John Hope Franklin endured this insult. He also tells the story of going to the Library of Congress, and I do that a lot. And he tells a story of something I found amazing because it's a right I take for granted. That when he would go to the Library of Congress to work on From Slavery to Freedom, he and his white friends who were at the library on a Saturday would want to eat lunch. He couldn't go with them. He'd offer to make up reasons why he couldn't go. The real reason he couldn't go with them is because while he could eat with them, Capitol Hill restaurant would serve him on a Saturday. So he finally told his friends, the real reason that I bring my lunch and I just stand over the corner and eat is because I can't go to these restaurants. And he said some of the people, some of his friends said, I don't know, what price is this? I mean, I couldn't do this. I couldn't, I just couldn't be a historian if I had to pay that price. But that's the gift that he gave to us. He did endure those insults. That type of access, he recognized didn't even exist for an earlier generation of scholars. Scholars like Carter G. Woodson, the father of Black history, W.E. Du Bois, they didn't even have the back row segregated experience. He was in the right, in quotes, place at the right time relative to his predecessors. And so he found curators who, instead of completely denying him access, offered him Jim Crow accommodations. Surely his fortitude was a gift present in history. So John Hope Franklin, more than any other scholar, brought the Black presence into the American historical narrative. And he did it. He brought Black history into the American historical narrative primarily from slavery to freedom. That is the book, this classic, this century-sweeping classic that uncovered historical actors and facts and texts that had just been hitherto unknown in history. Carter G. Woodson used to say, we work to refute the lie that the Negro has no history and none worthy of respect. Franklin showed, through From Slavery to Freedom, that Blacks indeed had a history worthy of respect, a big, thick book worthy of respect. In fact, his legacy to us is that he was able to bring out of obscurity and onto the pages of history books the history of Black people, bring it into the consciousness of America. Now, that's not that other scholars had not tried to do this. Again, Carter Woodson was one, Du Bois was one, Rayford W. Logan at Howard University was another, Benjamin Quarles at Morgan State University was another. These were pioneers in Black history, and we honor them. But none of them, with all due respect to these pioneers, and with all due respect to us in the Academy today, none of them, no one, brought Black history into the American mainstream of history, into the mainstream of the historical profession, into the mainstream of annual conferences than did John Franklin. The Black contribution to America, a record that was once denied, disregarded, and disrespected, no longer stands at the backboard of scholarship. Thanks to John Hope and to the uncompromising standards that he brought to From Slavery to Freedom, Black people don't enter into the line through some backdoor. John Hope Franklin's legacy has been the transformative power of his life as a scholar. He was a transformative intellect. His legacy as an intellectually vital and generous man. Everyone speaks about his generosity. His legacy, the quality and influence of his ideas in shaping the direction and the reception of African American history. So for this, we honor him. For this reason, From Slavery to Freedom goes into its 9th edition. He is gone, but this conference honors him. His ideas live on. He was a gift to us. He was a gift to Black people. He was a gift to America. He was and always will be the present in history. And I'm honored, deeply, to be able to tell his story in the 9th edition. Thank you.
written, or were there chunks that you left? How did you?
I think maybe about 20% is still in there.
Sorry?
Maybe 20% is in there. But yes, new chapter, they're just new chapter titles. I hope all of the Bible, that's the first request. The second request is that if you don't have an older edition, compare it. The chapter titles are different. So to give you an example, I mean, there's so much rewriting that I have to do because women, just my preference. So there's a lot of rewriting. I have big sections on women's era, black feminism. And then I have just women that just kind of walk through in and out of chapters. Okay, then I have a whole chapter on Black Power, which never existed before. These are just a few examples. So I had to do a lot of writing from scratch.
To what extent were you in consultation with Black Pope? Or were you?
I didn't. No, I really wasn't. I showed him chapters 1 to 15, and to his credit, he was so receptive because I was scared, frankly, when I went down to Durham the first time with the first 5 chapters. I was scared because I thought he'd say, "This isn't the book I wrote." You know, a man in his 90s can be somewhat. But he wasn't. He was just as useful and vibrant. And so he just said, "This is fantastic." And then I brought to him, through 15. And he was always just delighted. So now, and he never got to see Black Power, but I'm sure he will like it. He would have liked it. But he was a man, a life of learning. So I think that captures his openness. But I also think that he understood that the book needed to speak to the present. In the longer version of this talk that I gave today, one of the points that I make is just a very simple one, that to speak to the present, you have to speak in a phrase that the present understands. When he wrote his first book, The Free Negro in North Carolina, and also From Slavery to Freedom, he wrote those in 43 and 47. Well, David Leonard Lewis, the historian, recalling Franklin's work, said, those books were much more modern. They sounded more modern than Carter Woodson, because Carter Woodson had written a similar book too, From Slavery to Freedom, The Negro and My History. And he had also written a book on free heads of households, similar to some degree to Franklin. So Lewis was praising how much more modern Franklin sounded in 1943 and 47 to a man who wrote the 20s. But I argue that Woodson sounded modern to people. When he wrote the 20s, he was modern to all these people who said black people didn't even have a history. So in the 21st century, the language needed to change a bit. It needed to sound like a voice, a prose, closer to what the 21st century is. Hopefully it's there. Another question? Yes?
Well, you talked about how the questions asked of the past in the present. And I'm interested in diaspora